Desire is one of the most powerful forces within the human experience. It sits at the root of movement, of striving, of ambition, and of suffering. The nature of desire is not simple. It is layered, shifting, sometimes invisible, sometimes burning so strongly that it consumes the entire field of thought. To observe desire is to observe the current that pulls the human mind forward, always into the future, always towards what is not yet here. It is a longing that ties us to what we do not possess, and yet without it, life would lack the very spark that brings motion. At its most basic, desire is the pull of life towards something it believes will increase its state of fulfillment or reduce its state of discomfort. A child desires food when hunger strikes. A student desires success in order to validate their efforts. A worker desires direction or wealth to feel a sense of achievement. These desires are natural. They arise as part of living. Yet, once one begins to see the patterns more deeply, it becomes clear that desire rarely remains satisfied. The moment one desire is fulfilled, another takes its place, as if the mind is never still, never complete, always looking toward a horizon that retreats with every step taken. This restless quality of desire shows its duality. On one side, it is the fire of progress. Civilizations are built upon desire, inventions emerge because of it, exploration and discovery are driven by it. Without desire, there will be no striving towards something greater. On the other side, desire is the seed of dissatisfaction because it always implies a lack. The very act of desiring something means admitting that what is right now is not enough. In this way, desire ties the human being to an endless loop of seeking, grasping, and chasing shadows that dissolve once they are touched. To observe the nature of desire clearly requires inner stillness. When the mind is racing, when emotions are stirred, desire disguises itself as necessity. It whispers, "If you only have this, then you will finally feel complete." But when awareness sharpens, one sees how quickly desire shifts from one object to another. Today it attaches itself to wealth, tomorrow to recognition, the next day to companionship, and then to solitude. Desire is not bound to a single form, it is a movement of the mind itself. And this movement is often mistaken for freedom, when in truth it binds us to endless craving. Yet desire itself is not the enemy, it is a natural expression of being alive. What matters is the relationship one has with desire. If one becomes enslaved by it, then life turns into an endless pursuit with no rest. If one can see it for what it is, then desire becomes a teacher. It reveals the hidden attachments of the mind, the subtle fears that push it, and the illusions that shape it. To see desire clearly is to see the self more clearly. Desire can be divided into different shades. There are desires rooted in the body, such as hunger, thirst, and comfort. These are simple, they arise and pass, and they can be fulfilled without much complication. But there are desires rooted in the mind and in the heart, and these are far more complex. The desire for approval, the desire to be seen, the desire to outshine others, the desire to hold on to what is fleeting. These are the ones that create turbulence. They do not vanish easily because they are tied to identity, to the story one carries of who they believe they are. When the mind identifies strongly with its desires, it suffers when they are not met. A person who believes their worth is tied to recognition will suffer deeply when ignored. A person who ties happiness to material wealth will live in fear of loss. A person who desires permanence in relationships will feel betrayed by the natural flow of change. In this way, desire, when misunderstood, becomes a chain. It ties the human being not to the object itself, but to the fear of not having it, and the pain of possibly losing it. But there is another way of approaching desire. Instead of being consumed by it, one can use it as a mirror. Every desire points to something deeper. The desire for recognition often points to a deeper longing for self-acceptance. The desire for wealth may point to a deeper longing for security or freedom. The desire for companionship may point to a deeper longing for inner harmony. If one looks beneath the surface of desire, one often finds not an object but a state of being that the mind is yearning for. The external objects are merely substitutes for that deeper state, and here lies the paradox of desire. The more one chases external fulfillment, the more the inner state remains unsatisfied. But when one begins to cultivate the inner state directly, the external chase loses its grip. The mind begins to recognize that the peace it longs for is not delivered by objects, achievements, or recognition. It arises in moments of clarity, of silence, of alignment with life as it is. Still, the pull of desire will never vanish completely. It is part of the human condition. But the nature of desire can shift from unconscious craving to conscious direction. Instead of desiring endlessly from a place of lack, one can direct desire towards growth, towards understanding, towards alignment with truth. This is not the same as being free of desire, but it is to transform the relationship with it. Instead of being dragged, one learns to guide. Instead of being enslaved, one becomes aware. The nature of desire is therefore both a challenge and a guide. It challenges by keeping the mind restless, always searching for what is next. But it also guides by revealing what the mind values, what it fears, and what it clings to. To sit with desire without immediately running after it is to glimpse its true form. And to glimpse its true form is to see how much of life is shaped not by the present moment itself, but by the longing for something imagined just beyond reach. The restlessness of the mind is a condition that almost every human being experiences, yet very few pause long enough to recognize. It is like a river that has been disturbed by stones and fallen branches, causing ripples and waves to continuously move across the surface. The river does not rest, not because it is incapable of stillness, but because it carries too many things along its flow. In the same way, the human mind carries burdens, thoughts, and distractions that keep it in a constant state of agitation. This restlessness can manifest as worried out, overthinking, or the inability to focus. It becomes a cycle where the mind jumps from one thought to another, from one possibility to another, and from one memory to another. When the mind is restless, even the smallest problem becomes magnified. A single thought has the power to multiply into dozens, creating stories and scenarios that may never unfold in reality. Restlessness thrives on feeding itself, building momentum like a fire that grows stronger the more it consumes. What begins as a spark of uncertainty soon turns into flames of anxiety. This is the nature of the untrained mind. It does not remain neutral. It transforms simple ideas into complex chains of thought that often weigh down the spirit. The restlessness of the mind does not appear out of nowhere. It is cultivated through habits, environments, and the way we choose to engage with life. When we fill every moment with noise, activity, and stimulation, the mind never has the chance to pause. It becomes accustomed to constant motion, always searching for the next distraction, the next answer, the next validation. In such a state, silence feels uncomfortable and stillness feels unnatural. The mind, when restless, resists the very medicine that can heal it. Restlessness also arises from attachment. The human tendency is to hold on to what is familiar even when it no longer serves us. We cling to the past, to mistakes, to regrets, and to the image we have created of ourselves. Each attachment adds weight to the mind, and when the mind carries too much weight, it struggles to settle. Like a bird with stones tied to its wings, the mind cannot soar freely. It flutters anxiously, caught between its nature to fly and the burden it cannot release. Another cause of restlessness is fear of the future. The mind projects countless outcomes, most of which never come true. Yet the energy spent worrying about these outcomes is real, draining life from the present moment. This kind of restlessness is like standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down, and imagining every possible way of falling. The fear prevents you from stepping forward, even when the path is safe. The mind, restless and filled with projections, becomes trapped between hesitation and desire, unable to move with clarity. To observe the restlessness of the mind is the first step toward understanding it. Observation requires awareness, a willingness to sit with the movement of thoughts without immediately reacting. In doing so, one begins to see that restlessness is not the mind's natural state, but rather a temporary condition caused by disturbance. Just as muddy water clears when left undisturbed, the mind too can return to clarity when it is given space. But this clarity does not come through force or suppression. It emerges through patience, discipline, and alignment with practices that calm the internal storm. Breath becomes an important tool in this process. The rhythm of the breath has the power to influence the rhythm of thought. When the breath is shallow and hurried, the mind reflects the same quality, moving in a scattered and fragmented way. When the breath deepens and slows, the mind begins to mirror that calmness. Breathing consciously is like placing an anchor into turbulent waters. It does not stop the waves, but it prevents one from being carried away by them. The restless mind often disguises itself as productivity. It convinces us that by constantly thinking, planning, and analyzing, we are moving forward. But true progress requires focus, and focus cannot exist in restlessness. The constant shifting of attention wastes energy, leaving the body tired and the spirit unfulfilled. It is not the quantity of thoughts that determines growth, but the quality of presence given to each thought. Restlessness scatters energy, while focus channels it into transformation. In moments of restlessness, silence feels unbearable because it confronts us with ourselves. Without distractions, the mind is forced to face what it has been running from. Yet within this confrontation lies the possibility of freedom. Restlessness loses its power when it is illuminated by awareness. By seeing the patterns of the mind, the cycles of thought, and the attachments that fuel them, one gains the ability to choose differently. Restlessness thrives in unconsciousness, but diminishes in the presence of mindful attention. The restless mind, if left unchecked, can control one's entire life. Decisions are made in haste, emotions become volatile, and relationships are strained. But when restlessness is understood, it transforms from a weakness into a teacher. It shows us where we are holding on, where we are resisting, and where we are living in fear. It points directly to the areas that require release and growth. Instead of treating restlessness as an enemy, one can approach it as a signal guiding the way toward balance. The journey of calming the restless mind is not about eliminating thought. It is about harmonizing thought with stillness so that the mind becomes a tool rather than a tyrant. When restlessness fades, the mind begins to act with precision like a sharpened blade that cuts through confusion. A calm mind is not empty. It is fully alive, fully aware, and fully present in each moment. Restlessness blinds us with excess, but calmness allows us to see with clarity. There are many moments in life when you achieve what you thought you wanted, yet something within feels incomplete. You acquire possessions, you build status, you gain recognition from others, but in the quietness of your own being, you realize that none of it has satisfied the hunger inside. This is what we call the lack of inner fulfillment. It is the silent emptiness that creeps into your awareness even when everything outside appears successful. It is the subtle whisper that asks, "Is this all there is?" The lack of inner fulfillment does not arrive suddenly. It is built layer by layer when we ignore our own essence. It begins when life is lived only through the eyes of others, when the value of your existence is measured by comparison, approval, or recognition. The more you try to satisfy external demands, the further you drift from the source of genuine contentment. What makes this feeling dangerous is that you can disguise it with temporary pleasures, distractions, or constant movement, but the void will always return once the noise subsides. Human beings are wired to seek meaning, not just achievement. When your actions are disconnected from meaning, you may experience progress in material terms, but regression in spiritual and emotional terms. You may feel an exhaustion that no sleep can cure, because it is not the body that is tired, but the soul that is starved. This is the essence of inner lack, the misalignment between what you do and who you truly are. Consider how many people live their lives running on the treadmill of accomplishment. They keep chasing the next milestone, thinking that once they reach it, they will finally feel complete. But once the milestone is reached, there is a temporary spark, followed by the same emptiness. The problem is not in striving, but in striving without direction toward your essence. To fulfill yourself, your actions must grow from the root of your inner being. Without this root, everything you build will feel hollow. The lack of fulfillment often reveals itself in moments of silence, when you are no longer distracted, when the phone is put away, when the conversations stop, when you are left alone with your thoughts. This is when the emptiness becomes loudest. For some, it shows as restlessness, for others as anxiety, for others as a low and steady dissatisfaction. The tendency is to run from these moments, to drown them out with more activity, more consumption, more stimulation. Yet the more you run, the further you move from the resolution. At its core, lack of inner fulfillment is not a punishment, but a signal. It is the body and mind telling you that the path you are walking is not aligned with your deeper nature. Just as hunger reminds you that the body needs food, emptiness reminds you that the soul needs nourishment. But while physical hunger can be easily satisfied by eating, spiritual hunger requires something more subtle. It requires understanding, self-reflection, and courage to let go of what is superficial. To understand fulfillment, one must look inward rather than outward. You may ask yourself, what is it that I truly value? What makes my being come alive? What activities, relationships, or states of mind make me forget time because they feel so natural? These questions are not answered by logic alone, but by a deeper listening, a listening that does not involve words but feeling. Without taking time to listen, you risk building a life that looks strong on the outside but collapses within. Another dimension of lack is the attachment to external validation. Many people live in a way that is entirely constructed around being seen, liked, or admired. Their sense of worth rises and falls depending on how others react to them. This dependency ensures that fulfillment is always outside of reach because it is always in the hands of someone else. True fulfillment cannot be handed to you by another. It must emerge from a relationship with your own essence. It is also important to recognize how constant comparison amplifies inner emptiness. When your measure of success is always placed against another person's life, you will never find rest. There will always be someone with more wealth, more recognition, more achievement. The cycle becomes endless. Comparison creates distance from fulfillment because it shifts your attention outward instead of inward. The more you focus on others' journeys, the less energy remains to discover your own. The lack of inner fulfillment is not a weakness, but a teacher. It forces you to ask difficult questions about the path you are walking. It challenges you to re-evaluate your choices, your desires, and your attachments. It reveals the difference between a life that is full on the surface and a life that is rich at its core. Those who are willing to listen to this emptiness often discover that it is not emptiness at all, but space. A space that is waiting to be filled with authenticity, purpose, and truth. But fulfillment is not about adding more. It is often about releasing. Releasing expectations, releasing attachments, releasing the belief that happiness lies somewhere outside, waiting for you. By simplifying, by letting go, you allow your being to align more closely with its natural rhythm. And in that alignment, fulfillment emerges not as something you chase, but as something that quietly appears when the noise settles. The lack of fulfillment grows when life is lived reactively, when every action is based on escaping discomfort or chasing comfort. Yet true fulfillment is not dependent on comfort at all. It arises from depth. To cultivate this depth, one must dare to sit with the emptiness rather than escape it. One must dare to stop running, to pause, and to face the questions that the silence brings. The experience of emptiness is not a flaw, but an invitation. An invitation to discover what cannot be taken away by loss, what cannot be shaken by change, what cannot be destroyed by time. It is an invitation to find a kind of nourishment that is not found in possessions or approval, but in the quiet recognition of your own being. And only when that recognition takes root does the lack of inner fulfillment begin to dissolve, not because you have filled it with something external, but because you have discovered that what you sought was never missing. To begin with, discipline and temptation are two forces that are constantly at war within the human experience. They are like two currents moving in opposite directions, each pulling at the mind, the body, and the spirit. Discipline seeks to steady you, to guide you along the path of growth, consistency, and inner strength. Temptation, on the other hand, whispers promises of ease, comfort, and instant gratification. The moment you wake up in the morning, the battle begins. Do you rise with purpose, or do you surrender to the call of comfort? Every decision becomes a small negotiation between discipline and temptation, and the outcome of your life is written through these negotiations. Temptation thrives in immediacy. It is the voice that convinces you to abandon the workout because you are tired, to avoid the study session because entertainment is more appealing, to indulge in excess rather than restraint because it feels good in the moment. It does not concern itself with what happens tomorrow. Its only focus is on now. Discipline, however, sees further. It stretches beyond the fleeting satisfaction of the moment and looks to the horizon of who you could become. While temptation operates on desire, discipline operates on vision. And the truth is, most people are far more responsive to desire than to vision, because desire is felt instantly, whereas vision requires patience and trust. The strength of discipline is built like a muscle. It does not arrive fully formed. It develops through repetition, through facing temptation and choosing again and again to align with your higher purpose rather than your lower urges. Every time you choose discipline, you are strengthening your inner structure. And every time you choose temptation, you are loosening it. Imagine a tree with deep roots. Each act of discipline drives those roots further into the earth, making you resilient to storms, distractions, and challenges. Each act of surrender to temptation pulls at those roots, weakening your foundation, leaving you more vulnerable to collapse when life presses hard against you. Temptation is not always obvious. Sometimes it comes disguised. It can appear as rest when rest is not needed, as indulgence when moderation would suffice, as excuses that sound reasonable but are merely forms of avoidance. Temptation plays on emotion, and because emotions fluctuate like the weather, it finds many opportunities to take control. Discipline, however, is not emotional. It is rooted in principle. It is the commitment to action regardless of feeling. When you act only when you feel like it, temptation wins. But when you act because you said you would, because you honor the principle, discipline grows stronger and temptation loses its grip. There is also a cost to each choice. Temptation offers you something that feels like a gift in the present, but it demands a debt in the future. The skipped responsibility becomes stress tomorrow. The indulgence becomes regret. The avoidance becomes lost opportunity. Discipline works differently. It asks for payment in the present. It asks for sweat, focus, restraint, and effort now, but it delivers freedom, peace, and strength later. Temptation gives pleasure and takes freedom. Discipline takes effort and gives freedom. One imprisons, the other liberates. The paradox is that most are unwilling to pay the price of discipline, and so they end up paying the heavier debt of temptation. Consider also the nature of fulfillment. Temptation can never offer fulfillment. It can only offer satisfaction. Satisfaction fades. It leaves you searching again for the next fix, the next indulgence, the next temporary escape. Fulfillment, however, comes from discipline. It arises from the knowledge that you endured, that you did not betray yourself, that you honored your commitments. The glow that comes from inner alignment, from walking the harder path consistently, is something temptation can never reproduce. It is deeper, stronger, and unshakable because it is built on truth rather than impulse. Temptation will always exist. It cannot be eliminated because it is tied to human nature, but it can be managed, understood, and weakened through the strengthening of discipline. To resist temptation, one must not rely on willpower alone because willpower is finite. Instead, one must cultivate systems, habits, and environments that make discipline the natural choice. Remove the distractions, set clear boundaries, and remind yourself daily of the vision you are working toward. This is how discipline becomes less of a struggle and more of a way of life. When discipline is embedded into your identity, temptation loses its power because you no longer see it as an option worth considering. Discipline does not mean deprivation. It does not mean living without joy or pleasure. It means living in alignment with what truly matters to you. Temptation may promise joy, but it steals meaning. Discipline ensures that joy is rooted in purpose, that pleasure is experienced without regret, that progress is steady and sustainable. In this way, discipline is freedom disguised as effort, and temptation is bondage disguised as pleasure. The war between discipline and temptation is not fought once. It is fought every day in small choices and large ones, in the silence of the morning and in the noise of the evening. It is fought when no one is watching, when you are alone with your own thoughts, when you are tempted to betray yourself for a fleeting moment of comfort. And each choice matters because each choice tilts the balance of who you are becoming. Temptation will always remain the easy path, and discipline will always remain the harder path. But only one of them leads to strength, to growth, and to freedom. Human life unfolds as a continuous dance between holding on and letting go. From the moment of birth, attachment becomes our natural language. The newborn clings to the warmth of a mother's touch, to the rhythm of a heartbeat, to the certainty that comfort will follow discomfort. Attachment gives us the sense of belonging, safety, and meaning. Yet as life continues, what once ensured survival slowly begins to weave invisible chains that bind the mind, the body, and the spirit. Patterns of attachment become so deeply ingrained that we often mistake them for who we are, forgetting that they are simply habits, repeated responses to fear, desire, and memory. Attachments appear in many forms. They can be to people, to places, to possessions, to ideas, or even to versions of ourselves that no longer exist. When you repeat the same thought often enough, when you return to the same emotional state again and again, it begins to etch a pattern inside the mind. Like grooves carved into stone, these patterns grow deeper with time, and soon the mind automatically follows them. This is why letting go is so difficult, because the attachment is not just to the object itself, but to the familiarity of the pattern that surrounds it. The mind finds comfort in what it knows, even if what it knows brings suffering. Consider how many times attachment disguises itself as love when in truth it is possession. One clings to another person, believing the bond is unbreakable, when in reality what is being held is not love itself, but the fear of being alone. The pattern is not the relationship, but the repeated attachment to security. Similarly, one may attach to success not because the achievement itself brings joy, but because recognition feeds the ego's need to feel significant. The pattern is not the accomplishment, but the constant hunger to be validated. Attachments can also hide behind noble appearances. A person may attach to discipline, to routine, to spiritual practice, and while these things may bring growth, the clinging to them can also become a prison. If meditation is skipped for a day and guilt arises, it reveals that attachment is still at work. The true freedom of practice lies not in the act itself, but in the ability to be without the fear of losing it. To attach to the path is as binding as attaching to material things, for both are driven by the same fear, the fear of emptiness. These patterns are not inherently bad. They are part of the human experience, part of the way consciousness interacts with the world. But when we remain unconscious of them, they rule us. To see clearly, one must first observe, sit quietly and watch the mind as it reacts throughout the day. Notice how often thought clings to something, a memory of yesterday, a plan for tomorrow, an unresolved argument, a lingering desire. Each of these is a thread, and together they weave the net of attachment. With awareness, the pattern becomes visible. Without awareness, the pattern runs silently, dictating choices and reactions. Attachment also shows up in the body. Notice the shoulders that tighten when stress appears, the chest that constricts when fear arises, the fists that clench when anger grows. These are physical manifestations of inner holding. The body remembers and the body holds. Over time, these repeated patterns of tension accumulate, shaping posture, health, and energy flow. To release the body is to begin to release the mind, and to release the mind is to allow the body to soften. At the heart of attachment lies the illusion of permanence. The mind wants to freeze moments, to capture experiences, to make people stay as they are. Yet life is never static. Everything changes, everything moves, everything flows. To hold tightly to what is bound to change is to invite suffering. When the river flows and one tries to hold the water in the hand, the tighter the grip, the faster the water escapes. In the same way, when the mind grips to people, possessions, or moments, the very act of clinging accelerates the sense of loss. The study of attachment is the study of fear and desire. Fear of losing, desire of keeping. Fear of emptiness, desire of fullness. These two forces dance together endlessly, feeding one another, shaping the choices that define a life. One who understands patterns of attachment begins to see through them, begins to recognize that freedom is not in destroying them, but in no longer being ruled by them. It is like seeing a knot in a rope. One does not have to cut the rope entirely to release the knot. One simply loosens the tension until the knot falls apart naturally. Observation brings light. When the pattern is seen, it weakens. When it weakens, the grip softens. When the grip softens, space appears. And in that space, something new emerges: clarity, peace, stillness. These qualities are not added from the outside. They are revealed from within once the patterns lose their hold. This is the art of living without being bound. Not rejecting attachments, not clinging to them, but moving with them like waves that rise and fall, without resistance, without fear. Awareness is the silent witness within, the observer that sees without judgment, the presence that notices before action takes place. It is not hurried, it is not swayed, it is not moved by impulse. Awareness is the light of consciousness that shines on everything. Our thoughts, our emotions, our reactions, and the patterns that have been formed over years of living without truly questioning. Without awareness, life feels mechanical. People drift from one moment to another, pulled by habits, repeating cycles, unaware of why they speak, why they act, why they react. Awareness then becomes the first doorway. It is the space in which life becomes visible, where the unconscious turns into the conscious, where what was hidden beneath the surface begins to emerge into the open field of the mind. Choice, on the other hand, is the natural extension of awareness. Once something has been brought into the light, it can no longer remain the same. When you see the thought that arises, when you recognize the pattern that repeats, when you acknowledge the emotion that tries to rule you, you are no longer bound by it. Choice is the power to respond differently, to alter the direction of your actions, to interrupt the cycle that once seemed unbreakable. But choice without awareness is blind, and awareness without choice is incomplete. They belong together like two sides of the same coin, guiding human beings toward transformation and freedom. To live without awareness is to be a prisoner of one's conditioning. Imagine walking a path with your eyes closed, stumbling on the same stone again and again, wondering why the pain never ceases. Without awareness, the stone remains invisible, and the stumbling continues endlessly. When awareness is cultivated, the stone is seen, the path becomes clear, and the possibility of stepping around it emerges. This moment of recognition is awareness. The act of moving differently is choice. Together, they free the traveler from the cycle of pain that once seemed unavoidable. Awareness does not come through force. It arises through stillness, through observation, through the willingness to pause. It comes when one learns to look within and see not only the surface of thoughts, but also the subtle undercurrents that drive them. The restless mind produces endless commentary, but beneath it lies a more silent layer. To dwell in this silence is to expand awareness. In such a state, even the smallest impulses become visible, the slight tension in the body, the fleeting emotion in the chest, the spark of anger before it becomes fire. To see it before it grows is awareness in action. Choice becomes most powerful at these subtle moments. The moment before words leave the mouth, there is space. The moment before the hand reacts in anger, there is space. The moment before a negative thought spirals into suffering, there is space. Within this space lies the field of choice. One can continue the old habit, or one can shift. One can fall into reaction, or one can respond with clarity. This power is available in every moment, yet it can only be claimed when awareness is sharp enough to notice the space itself. The mind often resists awareness because awareness dissolves illusions. Illusions are comfortable, patterns are familiar, habits feel safe. Even if they cause suffering, there is a strange comfort in what is known. But awareness does not tolerate such illusions. It strips away the stories that justify repeated mistakes. It reveals the truth behind the masks we wear. It uncovers the hidden motives behind actions. This revelation may be uncomfortable, but within discomfort lies the seed of transformation. To see clearly is not always easy, but it is always liberating. Choice, once awakened, demands responsibility. When someone has not yet seen, they can say, "I did not know." But once awareness has arisen, ignorance is no longer an excuse. Choice then becomes a responsibility, a conscious act of creation. Each choice shapes not only the outer circumstances, but also the inner structure of being. Every decision either strengthens awareness or weakens it, either expands consciousness or narrows it. Repeated choices create character, and character becomes destiny. In this way, choice is not a small momentary act, but the architect of one's life. Awareness and choice also extend beyond the individual. A society lacking awareness is a society driven by blind repetition, trapped in cycles of conflict, consumption, and destruction. When awareness grows in the collective, new choices become possible. Choices that align with harmony, sustainability, and compassion. Awareness reveals interconnection, that every action ripples beyond the self, touching others, shaping the world. Choice rooted in this awareness creates a future different from the past, a reality guided not by unconscious impulse, but by conscious direction. Cultivating awareness requires discipline, but it is not the discipline of rigidity. It is the discipline of remembering, of returning, of noticing again and again. The practice may be meditation, mindful breathing, silent reflection, or simply pausing in the midst of daily life. Each time the attention is reclaimed, awareness strengthens. With each strengthening, choice becomes clearer, more deliberate, more powerful. Slowly, the chains of old patterns loosen and a new way of living begins to emerge. Choice, when exercised repeatedly with awareness, becomes transformation. It is the seed that grows into new habits, new ways of thinking, new ways of being. Small choices accumulate, carving new pathways in the mind, opening new doors in life. A choice to pause instead of react, a choice to breathe instead of explode, a choice to listen instead of judge, a choice to reflect instead of blame. Each choice may seem small, but over time, they reshape the inner landscape. The person who once lived as a prisoner of habit becomes the master of their own being. Awareness and choice are not distant ideals, they are available in this very moment. They are not waiting in the future, nor do they belong only to monks, sages, or philosophers. They are present in the act of noticing the thought passing through right now, in the decision of how to respond to the next word spoken, in the conscious direction of the next step taken. Every moment of life contains this possibility. To awaken to it is to step into freedom, and to exercise it is to step into transformation.